about, though?
Well, we're live now, so that's what we're talking about.
Okay.
Are
All
you ready,
right.
Grandpa? You
No,
ready
man. I
to
mean, are you
just
gonna?
share it?
I'm about to, but I mean, are you gonna tell me what we're talking about live or not?
Yeah, I'll tell you
Or
when
are
we
you
go
just
live. Well,
waiting? Oh, you're
we're
waiting to
live.
tell me when you tell them.
That's right. I'm gonna tell everybody at the same time. I'm gonna do you like you do me. All
Okay.
right, you ready?
Oh,
I'm gonna
that's
run the
not even
intro.
cool, man.
I'm
All
gonna
right.
run that intro. Let's
All
do it.
right. All right. Let's do it.
Shut up and sit down.
Hey, what is up, everybody? Welcome to Dope and Dharma. As always, I
Mhm.
am the Dharma guy. He is the Dope Doctor, and together we are Dope and Dharma. And right now, if you're tuning in, you're listening to the Dharma Time edition, which is where we talk about, philosophical type stuff, spiritual stuff, things that we're
Mhm.
struggling with. Although, if I'm honest, most of our shows kind of all the same. We just title them differently, but I hear you. Other than our sports one
Not
and our
really.
political one,
Not really. No, when we talk
I think sports and
addictions, I mean, we
politics
try
are
to stay under
pretty.
addictions.
Yeah, but addictions runs into spirituality so much, man. So,
Sure,
anyways,
of
I
course, of
digress.
course.
Bottom line is, if you're listening to us now, you should listen to all of our stuff. Is what I'm getting at. So,
Oh, okay.
anyways, I so today I guess we're a couple minutes. No, actually, we're on time. You made it on time.
Oh
Look at
man,
that.
we're on time, bro. I put out the fire. I put it out, but
Okay.
well, I still have to do some more putting out after the show. But I mean,
Are our
you
fires
didn't tell me
ever
what we
all
were
the way put
talking
out?
about.
We're talking about
Just
invisible pain today.
so everybody knows. I mean, typically, I may like Trinity has more control on this show, just like I have more control of the Couch Live. So in other words, final decision of what the show's supposed to be talked about is on Trinity on this show, and final say so on the Couch Live is me, and on the Friday show. I mean, we both mutually just agree because we come up with multiple topics, so we all contribute to it. But so this one, I don't even know what we're going to be talking about today, Trinity. You want put it on there like you've been doing, so I can see it.
Welcome,
Let me see.
welcome to my world. I
Did I say something?
Yeah. Yeah. So, full disclosure before we get started, for all of you who are just tuning in, or you if you
Invisible
don't really,
pain. I see it now.
that's right, or if you don't know us very well. So him and I have been together now doing this for what, 10, 11 years, something like that. And I
Yeah.
remember when I first met this guy, he said, "Hey, come on the show." I was like, "Oh, okay." So went on the show, we started talking. He's like, "Hey, you want to do this on a more permanent basis?" I'm like, "Sure, okay, yeah." So I started coming in, and I would always text him like, "Hey, what are we talking about?" It was on Fridays, and he'd be like, "Oh, sometimes he would have a title or whatever, but
Maybe.
more often than not, the way this process would happen is myself, and at the time we had Denise Solis, who was AJ McLean's mom from the Backstreet Boys. She was our co-host. Awesome. She held it down for us. She was the mama bear of the group, kept us on task,
Mhm.
if you will. Her and I would show up early, and we'd be there. We'd be sitting, and he'd text us, say, "I'm on my way." The show starts at 12 o'clock on the dot because the particular station we were on had other programming prior and
Right.
post. Um, so we'd sit there, and we had an intro that wasn't the 10-second intro you just heard. It was more of like a minute, maybe a minute and 12. The intro would start playing. Her and I are putting our headphones on, getting ready. The intro is playing, and we'd see him walking up around the corner. So he would sit down as the intro ends, while the Captain Chris Hill at the time, the
But
producer, was fixing things or doing whatever. Like literally at the exact moment it goes live, he's introducing it, and that would be the moment in which her and I would find out what it is we're talking about that day. So I'm repaying that favor and letting him know at the moment we're going to talk about invisible pain today.
all
So,
right.
and what I mean by invisible pain, what do I mean by that, right? So, it's him and I have helped individuals dealing with stuff for many years in different capacities, you know.
Mhm.
Um, and it's come to my attention that a lot of us have no idea what pain looks like, right? A lot of us think we
Right.
know what pain looks like because we envision the person who's sitting down with like a broken arm, right? Or like physical pain. And then we think emotional pain, we think the person who is crying in the corner or, uh, emotionally struggling with something or upset or distraught. And yes, those are absolute examples of pain. However, pain oftentimes manifests itself in other ways. And I think that those are the ways that we're less aware of, I think. And so I think today, him and I should talk about that. Meaning, sometimes invisible pain or trauma from the past manifests itself in, poor decision making, poor impulse control, looking for love in all the wrong places. Um, it manifests itself in a myriad of ways that we sometimes can't put two and two together and realize that that's a direct result of some trauma or some pain that we went through. We just think that, oh, that's just how I handle things, or that's just who I am. This is just me. No, it's really not, right? It's who you've learned to be. It's your response to some sort of pain or trauma that you went through that you might not have gotten any closure on, you might not have dealt with. And it's showing up in your life now on a day-to-day basis. So that's what we're talking about today. And I think it's important because I've got teenagers and they've got teenage friends. And they're, it's been the last probably couple of weeks. There's been a lot of conversations about, hey, some of them are struggling with different things. They're spreading their wings, they're getting out there in the world, and they're working, and they're living on their own, and they're noticing certain behavior patterns, and they're asking me like, hey, why do I keep doing this? I was like, well, it's because you're in pain. And they're like, well, but I'm not in pain. I was like, but you are. Like, they can't comprehend. And when I bring it up to them and I mention it to them, their answer was always, yeah, but, right? Because I'll say, well, like, one of her friends had a father or a father and a mother that weren't emotionally there. They were, uh, from any subjective perspective, they weren't the greatest parents. Let's just leave it at that. And I would say that to her. I was like, yeah, you were dealing with that. And she was like, yeah, but I mean, I'm okay with that. I was like, but you're not. It's like, that's the thing is just because you're not thinking about it every single day, and you're not, distraught about it every single day, doesn't mean it didn't have a ripple effect in your life. Doesn't mean that the things you're doing right now aren't as a result of some unaddressed pain in your past. Um, like, for instance, myself, I've had plenty of it, and I'm sure we'll get into all that. But before I go any deeper, do you have any immediate thoughts on what we've talked about, what we're getting ready to talk about?
Yeah. Thank you for all
Well, then
that.
there you go. That settles it.
But it's not so invisible, is it? I mean, I know that you called the show Invisible Pain, but
Well,
it's really not so invisible. It's
to,
invisible to
to-
you, maybe, the person that
exactly.
it's experiencing it, right? That's what you mean.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's kind of what I meant.
By the way, I'm an FAU dad today, so,
Oh, nice,
not
very
a
nice.
teenager dad anymore.
Wait,
But
that's right. She's 20 now or 21. How old is she?
yeah, 20. She's 20. Yeah.
Okay,
My
yeah,
youngest, 20. Zoe.
that's great.
Yeah, it's not so invisible to you out there suffering with it, or to me that's currently going through it. But you're exactly right. I think a lot of times we forget about nature versus nurture, right? It's weird. It's like we learn about nature versus nurture early on in our lives. And so we realize that some things that you're just bred to be are genetically predisposed. And then some things are more the surroundings in which you learn to adapt to. Either your family learned to adapt a certain way and therefore they taught it to you, or you yourself experienced it and therefore you learned to adapt to a scenario or a certain stimuli. And so that exists, nature versus nurture. And that was always a matter of conversation. I mean, since the beginning of human time of
Yeah, it
discussing it,
still
right?
is. Yeah,
Still
still
is,
is.
and so sometimes it's up left to ourselves to decide, is that more nature, is that more nurture? And then you got to ask yourself, but is it really important for me to know the difference? As long as I know that I don't want to be that way, as long as I know that maybe I take issue with how that turned out. um I mean, I really only need to know if it's nature versus nurture if I don't plan on changing it, and I need to know which excuse to use. Other than that,
Exactly.
if you want to adapt the behavior, or if you don't like the behavior or your response to a certain thing, then you got to make a go at it. No matter what, you got to make a go at it. You know what I mean? I may not be able to make myself 6 foot tall, but I can make a go out of it. I can stand up straighter. I can work on my physical health so that I lose less to gravity on a day to day basis and due to age. I can make a go at it. I may not be successful in getting as tall as I want to be, but I can definitely maximize my current height. And that's the kind of stuff that we're talking about. I mean, you may be able to
Right.
maximize your current skill set sometimes of how to respond to things, even though you can't necessarily change it all.
Yeah. Well, real quick before we get on with that, you can watch us currently live on whenever we do go live on right now. It's
Hmm.
Facebook at WPSN. So it's facebook.com/WPSN. You can also
Hmm.
check us out at Dope and Dharma on YouTube. And today we're live on Twitch. And so one of our Facebook listeners, as you just see on the screen, wrote a comment. Michelle is her name. It says, "Do you think it may be an inner conscious struggle? Lessons in order to change?" What are your immediate thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I think there's so many inner conscious struggles constantly. I think we're all a bundle of instincts, right? There's just natural instincts that we have, just like the animal world has instincts, and sometimes we don't like those instincts, right? Like there's an Instagram uh, uh, page that I follow. It's called what Nature's Metal, um, and man, it's one of those that I don't recommend it to everybody. I know that speaking of Zoe, FAU dad, she like do not show Zoe any of it. She'll always be like, "Dad, why did you even show that to me?" She hates it. But me, on the other hand, I'm a little bit more sickish in nature. We've talked about many times that we come from the old faces of death youth,
Oh
where
yeah.
I don't know, I watch it. I can't help myself. It's like ridiculous, right? But anyway, yeah. So I think there is an inner conscious struggle that constantly happens of feeding that internal animal that we all have within us, uh, compared to feeding the animal we want to be. So there's an animal that you are, and there's an animal that you may aspire to be. And so it's important to feed the animal that you aspire to be. You don't really need to feed the animal that you are, because that dog finds its meat. What I mean, you don't have to worry.
Yeah.
That dog will find its meat one way or another, no matter how much you try to starve it. But feeding the animal you want to be is just a little bit more difficult. It takes a lot more effort in doing so.
Yeah. I mean, so while you were talking, one of the first things prior to we answered Michelle's question, one of the things that popped in my head, and
Mhm.
I think you were the one that first kind of said something to me one time that made me think, okay, people are different, right? And that is, for me personally, I am one of those kids when I was growing up, and I'm now an adult, where the why is extremely important to me. Like I have to know
Mhm.
why. I need to know why something's working, why something happened. Like I got to know the why. If I don't know the why, I'm gonna go nuts trying to figure it out, right? But
Mhm.
not everybody. You don't have to be that way. What I mean by that is, if you're dealing with something, or if you have some past trauma or some pain that you think is influencing your current behavior, the most important
Mhm.
thing is to understand what that behavior is and how to move forward. You don't
Right.
have to know why, right? Like it doesn't necessarily matter if you figure out whatever it was in the past that is contributing to whatever your current
Mhm.
behavior is. The most important part is to know what the current behavior is and figure out how to adjust and move on. However, like myself, I got to know why. And you'll never know for certain why. There's theories, and that's what all like psychology and all that is theoretically this happened, which caused you to do this. Um, so I guess what I'm saying is, don't be, don't think that you're gonna have to rack your brain or go relive all your childhood traumas in order to move forward. That's not necessarily what you have to do. You have to acknowledge them,
Mhm.
and you have to understand, like, okay, moving forward,
Mhm.
this is how I need to. But you don't have to know the exact moment, type of thing, right? Unless you're like me, and I gotta know.
Right.
I want to know. I think that's important to distinguish, because I think one of the big fears that people have, with kind of attacking and acknowledging some of our past pains, is they don't want to relive them. They're terrified to go back through it, put themselves back in that mental spot. So it's just easier in
Right.
their mind to just ignore it, or to pretend like it didn't happen, and just adjust to whatever
Mhm.
you're dealing with. And I say that somewhat facetiously, in the sense of, is it really easier? Like, we think that it's easier, but it's kind of not, right? It's like carrying that anchor through the desert. Like we think it's hard to put it down, but in all reality, we're lugging this thing with us every step of the way. It's easier just to
Right.
let it go, right?
Right.
Um, and so I would argue that it's not easier to just ignore it, because what you don't realize is the more you ignore it, the more you don't address it, the the more it plays a role in every single thing that you do. It's
Mhm.
like, as we've said before, you got like a board of directors up in your head who all gets to vote.
Mhm.
Well, if you don't address it, if you don't deal with it, then it's got a permanent seat in that board of directors, and it's got a permanent vote.
Yeah.
And so the more you address it and understand it, then you can start to say, you don't get a vote on this one. Like, I know where you're coming from, and your vote just doesn't count right now. And so I think it's an important thing to distinguish. I see Michelle put another one up here. Let me see, put it on. She says, sometimes feeding past trauma still gives the power over your emotions. Go ahead.
Yeah.
I
I
can
mean,
hear
left
you. Go
unchecked.
ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. Left unchecked or left unresolved. Yes. That's exactly what it feels like. And that's exactly what it tends to do. But I'm going to piggyback off of what you said and go a little bit further with it. Because, you know, I was under that school of thought. If it's under the rug, who cares? Leave it under the rug as long as it's not changing your life. And you know what? For the most part, for most things that you've experienced, that's okay. For most trauma, even for most minor trauma, that's probably okay. You're probably not in a significant amount of pain or disruption in your life where you have to go revisit it and relive it. Sometimes, counselors and therapists can accidentally open up certain boxes that just they're fine closed. I mean, they don't really
Yeah.
require a lot of opening. But let's say you're an individual that's getting to the point of very destructive thought, very irrational thought, suicidal thought, addiction use. Then you're gonna have to unpack a little bit more than the average Joe. You just are, because if not, um, it's going to be very difficult because we don't know what is really feeding it, right? Because we don't know what's
Yeah.
feeding it, and you don't go back and talk about some things, relive some things, then we don't know if we actually got it all out. It's almost like extracting cancer and then not spot checking to see if it's still there, if it's still present, if there's more that needs to be done. It's no different than that. So emotional pain is very similar. So what we'd have to do then is just start unpacking, right? Now,
Yep.
if you're unpacking, you're going to have to talk about it, but I'm going to give you a picture to kind of use. All right. So let's say a person in your life passed away and you have this item in your house that pains you to look at. So you put it in this drawer and you don't want to look at it because every time you look at it, you think about that person. It really hurts too bad. But you've already started exhibiting behaviors that show a person like me that you've had some loss. This behavior usually is attached to somebody who experienced a great deal of loss. Have you experienced a great deal of loss? No, 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 no. It's not really bothering me. So you're lying to me. You're telling me because you're kind of lying to yourself about it. You don't want to believe that it's attached. So you deny it. But eventually, after you've learned to trust a person like me, and we've had a lot more conversations, I reapproach it because this really does feel like this stems from exhibiting a lot of loss. And then finally you open up and say, yeah, I did lose somebody. This is the person I lost. And then in finding out, we find out that you have something in the drawer at home that you might bypass, but you constantly ignore that you just saw it. But it's in that drawer. So let's say you take it out of that drawer and look at it. And then we talk about just pull it out of the drawer, sit on your bed and just feel whatever comes. I'm not telling you how to feel, what to think, what to do. Just feel, just whatever it is, because I want you to come back and tell me what you feel. So it's kind of really important that you kind of be present in that moment and whatever you feel, just know that it's okay to feel. It's not going to go further than that. And then we're going to talk about it. So then you come back and you tell me, and then we talk about it. And then I ask you, where did you put it back? And you say, I put it back in that drawer. And I'm saying, all right, well, what if that drawer wasn't where it belonged? So let's talk about it. We talk more about it. And then we find out that, you know what? I really don't know why I put it in that drawer. There's really no reason it's in that particular drawer. So we talk about, all right, where else can it go? Where else can it be? I think at some point, you're probably going to come and say, I threw it away. And it's going to be like, what do you mean? And like, you know what? I was done with it. I realized, I don't know why I was hanging on to it. I was just hanging on to it for no reason. And it's just too much source of pain. And I realized that I didn't want to have it back in that drawer. I didn't want to put it back in the same drawer that I put in when I was a kid. And I didn't want to hang it up and display it because it's just, it really doesn't, I don't want to give it that much value in my current life. It really doesn't belong in my current life. So I just threw it away. And that's pretty much how we deal with a lot of pain and emotion after it's processed. After we process it, it doesn't go back into the same compartment in our emotion, our brain, and our soul, and our spirit, and our heart, in our thought process that we initially put it there when we were that younger person. When we were that younger person, we put it the only place we knew where to put it. But once you process through it, once you mature a little bit, once you live through life a little bit, you might put it somewhere different or store it somewhere different. And that's what we do. We constantly defrag the computer, defrag to the computer. And as we do it, the computer will put it where it needs to go, because that brain right here is an incredible computer that's so much smarter than you and me. We don't know how to figure it out. We pretend to know how to figure it out, and therapists out there pretend to know where that emotion should go and how it should be. But it's all, like Trini said, it's all theory. We're all just practicing a way to see what would work for you. But you're such a brilliant computer, and you are a brilliant individual inside, much smarter than you can ever allow yourself to be. And you will continue to defrag it till it goes to the place where it needs to go, to the point where someone like me, and we're all different, but someone like me has experienced a tremendous amount of trauma, yet it is in a place where I can talk about it, I can think about it, I can discuss it, and it has like no strength or value. So I'm just very fortunate that my personal one was able to get processed through that way. That doesn't mean every instance in my life was able to be processed that way. I'm just telling you about a specific one to give you an example of one that no longer has the weight, no longer has the value, no longer has the power to invisibly cause me that kind of pain. It's very overt now. It's a very obvious pain. It's a knowledgeable pain. I looked at it, I processed through it, and it lost all its power and its weight, and definitely lost all of its ability to be sneaky. Because I'm able to connect it to in other people. This is how that trauma exhibits. So did it do that to me? Yeah, man. Wow. It did all those things to me, just like it does to other people. As unique as I am, as different as I am, or that I thought I was, it actually exhibited in a very similar way as it does in other people, regardless of ever being taught that that's how you process through it, because that's the ineffective emotional response that is very human, and I'm human.
Yeah, I love that, you're very special and unique, just like everybody else. Because we all do. We all think that we're that, so unique and so special, which, to an extent we are. But
Mhm. Mhm.
regardless, I think that I think you hit the nail on the head, right? For
Yeah.
me, dealing with invisible pain is all
Mhm.
about not giving it the power anymore, right?
Right.
I think that by observing your responses to stuff and kind of digging into a little bit, like, well, why do I do that? Is that learned behavior or is that innate? I think in doing
Right.
so, you take away that power to be kind of like mindlessly affected by it, right? Like, as
Right.
one of the bigger examples that I see, right? If we're going to talk about specific behaviors, um, I'm sure, well, if you've listened to us for any length of time, you've heard us use the phrase "your picker's broken." I think that's a classic example of how our past traumas can come back to haunt us if we're not careful, right?
Mhm.
Because like we'll be just innately drawn to a particular type of person, be it a romantic relationship, be it a friendship, who knows? And if it just continuously becomes disastrous for us, and we've noticed that a lot of our relationships have a very common thread in them, we have to start asking ourselves, like, well, what is it about me that I'm finding attractive in that? Like, what is it that's drawing me to that? What about my value system is causing that? Once again, I'm not blaming any of us for other people's behavior, but there are potential like markers, right? There's potential things that we have in us that are attracted to that. Um, like I know, I mean, we all have heard the phrase "daddy issues" before. Well, I mean, in my younger days, when I was out there taking all these risks and riding motorcycles and stunt shows, and I was covered in tattoos and stuff, I was a magnet for girls with daddy issues. I was that bad boy image, and yeah, I was a magnet to it. And I wasn't exactly the epitome of boyfriend or relationship material, but that didn't stop any of us. Well, we still did our thing. But I'm not going to pretend like there wasn't, some daddy issues at play there, right? And even for me, right? Like there's some people in my life early on that were emotionally unavailable, which then caused me to be emotionally unavailable, and I sought that out in others, right? And it was quote unquote fun, but it came at a cost, right? And so I think that oftentimes our pickers are broken because we haven't made ourselves aware of certain things that we tend to do. some of our impulses. Like
Right.
there's so many things that the way it manifests in our lives, right? And I think that, like, for me, for instance, one of my biggest things I've learned in the last couple of years was that through so I used to always think that I was getting frustrated or angry at things, right? Something happened and I get mad. I get frustrated. Like, what's wrong with you? Like, I'm pissed off. That sucks. I'm mad at that. And I really truly
Mhm.
believe that I did, And I'm not saying I never get mad, but what I didn't realize at the time, that oftentimes when I thought that I was mad, I was actually sad. I was sad at something, or I was hurt over something. And instead of acknowledging that sadness, or instead of acknowledging that hurt, I funneled it through anger. And that's because of my past, my history, the things I've learned in my life led me up to that thing. And so for me, I was completely unaware that was an invisible pain, right? I was just walking around just spewing out this stuff, not realizing that, man, I'm coming from a place of hurt. I'm coming from a place of pain. And it wasn't until I learned that I was able to say, okay, now the next time a situation arises, I'm going to try to do my best to be more in tune with how I'm actually feeling. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't purposely choose anger and hurt sometimes, because I'm unskillful like everybody else. And I'll have my moments where I'm like, nope, I'm going to be mad right now. But at that point, at least I'm aware of it. And then I typically will come back afterwards and apologize or whatever and acknowledge, I probably should have done that. But before me being aware of it, I was just mindlessly doing it, not realizing that those reactions were coming from past pains and things of that nature that I wasn't able to deal with. I see there's a comment up here. There's a comment from Michelle on Facebook again. It says, sometimes women are seeking strong alpha males for a protector, not a daddy. Sure, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's really what it is, right? For whatever reasons, whatever that bond was. Um, I can relate entirely to everything you just said. From the anger to the females with daddy issues, or better stated, I mean, maybe we should start changing that daddy issues into protector issues, because that's really what it is, right?
Yeah.
It's the male protector issues. There's something to be said about that. And you know what? I didn't know that, Trinity. I really didn't know that until I was a lot older. I didn't know that
Same
that
here.
that that I was being a predator. I didn't try to be a predator. That's not what was my intent. As a matter of fact, I used to pride myself on saying that, look, there's no woman out there that can get upset with me or is walking around upset with me because I broke their heart, promising them something that wasn't going to happen. Dana's the first woman I ever said I love you to. Dana's my first real girlfriend. I mean, if there's any woman, I mean, I'd like to hear it. If there's any woman out there that ever could say that we were boyfriend and girlfriend, I would love to hear the story, because that's not true. At least I didn't look at it that way, and I felt that they understood. Well, I'm not saying that in a jerky way. I'm saying that in a reality way. I mean, they knew it and I knew it. I really really stayed away from virgins. I stayed away from women that were like, I hate to say good women, because I don't have any issues with past women that I went out with, so I don't want them to think that they're not good women. But they had certain things that they wanted. I had certain things I wanted.
Right.
Um, if they wanted drugs, I had drugs. If they just wanted physical attention, and I just wanted physical attention. If they wanted to cheat on somebody and I wanted a secret relationship, I mean, all that stuff, it just fed my ego and my needs, just like it was feeding their ego and their needs. You know what I mean? And so, we just weren't, we just weren't ready to be maybe where they're at now,
Right.
where I'm at now. And so, but I didn't know that. And so when I learned about, those issues that some women have, and then matched it with the issues that I had, it made perfect sense why those kind of women were attracted to me, and it made perfect sense why I was attracted to them. And so I still have, I guess, a respect to the women out there that were the type of women that I went out with, and I wish them the utmost peace and tranquility. That it's sad now to hear what
Yeah.
some of their issues might have been, because I do remember some of the stories that some of them would say, and they'd be like, "Man, that's
Yes.
messed up." But I never thought it had anything to do with me. I never thought that I was a player in that game. I always thought I was a good distraction, but a distraction is a player in that game. I was a distraction. I was an
100%.
escape. And so I was playing a role in that. And once I knew that, to be honest with you, Trinity, it made it hard to be at certain places and go to certain places that I used to enjoy. Like if you
Yep.
start thinking about, the strip clubs that even with Dana that we would go to, or something like that. I mean, it just made it hard to go. That it
Yeah.
was like, because there's women in pain there that I never used to look at them as women in pain. I never used to look at them as people that may have suffered at the hands of somebody, and that by me being there and by me contributing to it, I'm contributing to all of the whole cycle of it. And it's like, oh man, now I
Yeah, there's no doubt in my mind that some of my
can't even
quote
go to these
unquote.
places.
Oh,
So it kind of
we
sucks,
lost you
to
for a
be honest with you.
second
The more
there.
decipher, yeah, yeah, I was lost there for a second, wasn't I?
Yeah.
So obviously there's at least one of them that has passed away that is saying thank you for that apology, Louis, or something. So there's at least one passed away when they wanted, hey girl, I'm sorry, man. I'm
Yeah, I
here with
mean,
you. There's always got a place in my heart for you, but just not love. Dana's the only woman I ever loved other than my
right.
mother and the women in my life as far as family.
Yeah, there was no doubt. So, like what I learned early on for myself, this was, I don't know how many years ago now. It was quite some time ago. But what I learned was so much of my behavior that I thought was like a part of who I was, and just that's just who I am, was my seeking of power, right? Like I didn't realize how much the power
Mm,
dynamic
right.
meant to me, like and how, because so when I was little, I went through things that took my power away. I was a
Right.
powerless individual with a lot of things that were happening. And what I didn't
Mhm.
realize is at that time, from a perspective of survival, I decided that I was never going to let anybody ever take my power away again. I decided I was going to become the biggest, most powerful thing I could. And so every dynamic from that point forward in my life, every situation could be boiled down to who's got the power here. Whether that other person was playing that game or not, I was. So every interaction was, I'm going to make sure I have the power in the situation. And so
Right.
I would see fights when there wasn't any. I would see disagreements and arguments when there wasn't any, because in my mind, that's what it was all about. And so there's no doubt that a lot of my womanizing ways when I was younger, and I will call it that, even though that wasn't my intention. That's not what I thought I was doing at the time. But you know,
Right.
by the
Right.
definition of it, I was a womanizer. Um, that was a
Right.
thing feeding my ego, a power. Like, look how great I am. Look how awesome I am. I can have all these women who like me. Um, so that's kind of what I mean, right? That's what this whole thing is about invisible pain. Like, we're walking around convincing ourselves that our behavior is a choice that we're making every day. And while we're making a choice to follow through with whatever behavior, those those instinctual things that arise in us, they might be
Mhm.
caused by something else. There might be
Right.
a hidden pain, a hidden yearning for something that's causing that, right? Like, one of the my daughter's friends that was talking to me, her father is just, well, her parents just aren't emotionally there, and they weren't, the loving whatever parents, right? And so I tried to explain to her, I
Mhm.
said, that's going to affect you, right? Like, if you've never dealt with that, that's going to have a ripple effect. I was like, no, no, I was like, no, it is. It's like,
Right.
so as a child, as a kid, you can't process the fact that this is an adult who has adult pain, who's doing the best they can, and they're failing miserably like the rest of us. Like, as a
Right.
kid, you can't comprehend that. What you're thinking is, well, it's my fault. If I was better, then they'd be around more. If I was better, they'd love me more. Like, apparently, maybe I don't deserve it. Like, there's a lot of thoughts that go through your head, and those things don't just leave because you
Right.
you age. They don't just go away if you don't ever address them and look at them. They just like hang around, and they
Right.
affect, and everything you think and do is now filtered through those thoughts. And
Right.
so you'll find yourself seeking validation through other people, seeking to be validated you're good enough, even though you
Right.
you truly are. But you'll notice that the weight that you put on certain things all revolves around, hey, am I good enough? Is this person making me feel like I'm good enough? And then what you don't realize then is oftentimes that puts a lot of pressure then on the other person. First of all, it's not
Right.
sustainable. They can't make you feel it, because if you feel empty inside, or if you feel like that hole, they're only going to fill it but for so long, and before it starts to kind of dissipate and you're right back where you're at. And then in addition to that,
Right.
if that other person is healthy in any way, they're going to realize, like, yo, I don't like being that person to you. I don't like trying to be responsible for all of your it's a lot of pressure to put on another person to deliver your happiness every day.
Right.
And so those are the things I'm talking about, right? Like, that's what I mean by invisible pain. Because I mean, how many times have you and I talked to people in rooms or whatever, just anywhere, it doesn't matter. We have kids, and they've had friends, and I'm sure I know you've gotten involved in those conversations, much like I
Right.
have, for whatever reason, we're like the resident go-to for a lot of our teenagers' friends. But um, it's to us, it's painstakingly obvious what the issue might be, but to
Right.
them, they're completely oblivious to it.
Right.
And that's what I'm talking about. And it's not just teenagers. I mean, obviously, they're the easiest ones to point to, but I know many adults, who 30s, 40s, what have you, have
Right.
pain and trauma that they've never just really wrapped their head around with. And they've convinced themselves that that's just who they are.
Right.
And as we've said, that's not who
Right.
you are.
And
It's who you've learned to be.
yeah.
Can you hear my dog going crazy over here?
No.
Jesus.
And you're right. I mean, and if you're the person that says, "Well, that's just who I am," you're right. That's who you are now. But you're there for certain reasons. In other words, you got there through a certain process. You weren't born
Yeah.
that way. You got there through a certain process. So I don't want to fight you on your language if you say, that's who you are. But is that who you want to be? And is that who you want to keep
Yeah.
being? Because I'm gonna give you some other types of examples, because we talked about certain examples like with women in violence or anger and stuff like
Sure.
that. But what about attachment? So let's talk about attachment, because there's a couple of
Codependency?
examples I can give with that. No, just attachment. However that comes right. For instance, my father was gone a lot, right? I'm a daddy's boy, right? I felt more bonded to my father than my mother as a kid, because my mother and my brother were a little bit closer. So I was more bonded to my father, but my father was always gone. He was always, fighting some war conflict or whatever. He was a GI Joe. So, my dad is a retired command sergeant major. So he was constantly gone. So another thing that you do in the military family is you move a lot. Every 3 years or so, you move. And so whatever your world was like, you knew it was temporary, so you'd pack up overnight, and then you would leave, and you'd be in a completely different place, and you start all over. So you're always the new kid, and you're always the leaving. You're always leaving, and you're always the new kid. And so that is all those early years of life. So my attachment to people is still that way. I can easily disconnect. I can easily not miss. And even to this day, like I'll tell you a harder one in relationships, because Danny would be like, "Well, did you miss me?" Early on. She doesn't ask that anymore, because I'd hate to admit I don't miss, babe. I don't miss people. I love people. I would love to see them. I may even use the words "I miss you" but I mean it like in a just a respecting and a love thing, rather than I miss. I don't know what missing
Yearning.
feels like. Yeah, I don't know what
Yeah,
missing
same
really
here.
feels like, because once you're out of state, out of mind, I mean, you're not there. And I know I'm going to see you again if we see each, but I don't miss. Because I spent those days. I remember those days. There was a record that I used to play, and it was very painful. When my dad was gone, it was an Everly Brothers, "Dream, Dream, Dream, Dream."
Sure.
When
You got a beautiful singing voice, by the way. Oh, we lost you again. Boy, your internet is
I see you, that's anyway. I can't. Is it bad? Did you hear me?
yeah,
All
you're
right.
back now.
So I would play that Trinity. I would play that 45 over, and I know some of you guys don't know what a 45 is or don't know what a record is, but it's the little record, the little one. So
You little whippersnappers.
I would play that freaking I can still picture me in that room on my little record player that they now, like, it's cool now. So a lot of you millennials, it's that little record player that you got now that's really cool, because it's that case. Well, that actually was out as a record player back in the day. And
Yeah.
I had one of those, and I would play it over and over and over. And I remember sitting there crying and wishing my dad would be home, and wanting my dad to be home, and when is my dad coming home? And I would play it over and over again. So however that what it did is it manifested into me as a man who could easily disconnect from people and easily not miss people, and not be concerned that you're no longer there, to the point that when people in my life that I knew were passing away, I would disconnect before they actually passed. And I'm not proud of that. And I really don't, I haven't put the work in to fix that. Happened with my grandfather. Once I knew that it was my grandfather's last days, or last months, I disconnected. It was done. I last saw him one time, and then after I saw him, that was it. I said my goodbye in my head, and it was and he no longer existed for me from that point, because I knew I was going to lose him. My great grandmother died, and it was a real painful thing when I was a little kid. So I learned how to disconnect prior to them dying, and I never want to see it again. My grandmother, when she was passing away, same thing. The last time I saw her was the last time I spoke to her, and that was it. It was done. She was already passed away to me. And it's really hard to go back and look at that stuff, But that is an example of what Trinity's talking about. I had this invisible pain of death and connection. And you put those two things together. My great grandmother died when I was 11 or 12. I was like 11 or 12. It was horrible because she was calling my name. And I was right there in the room, and I was saying, I'm right here. And she didn't even recognize it, didn't even see me, and couldn't. And so that hurt too bad. And by the way, I said, I'll never return to Chihuahua, Mexico from that moment on. I still haven't been back to Chihuahua, Mexico. Never went back to Chihuahua. Do I want to go? Yeah, but do I really want to go? I guess not, because I haven't. And then I haven't been back to Puerto Rico since my grandfather passed away. So I disconnect, and it's just like I don't go back there. It's like I don't go there. I don't see it. Out of state, out of mind. And it's just my way of dealing with that pain. And do I need to go back and fix it? I don't know. If I could find a way that is really disrupting my connection with people that are currently existing, then yeah. If it was causing me to do some maladaptive behavior, or there was some maladaptive behavior that I would kind of need to find the source of it, then yeah. But until that point, it's kind of one of those things that, yeah, maybe that's my invisible response to an invisible pain, or my overt response to an invisible pain, but I'm going to leave it invisible because it's not currently interrupting anything like my current relationships. Does that make sense, Trinity, of how I explain that attachment?
Yeah, I mean, 100%.
By the way, I'll go one tiny bit further. From being that military kid who's constantly disconnecting and always had to leave stuff behind, I used to only have one box. And by the way, I still own that box.
Yeah, I
you would
remember
pack
that.
one box. I still have the box in that box. As a matter of fact, we talked the other day how somebody's pictures got in my box. I don't know how the pictures got in my box because they moved with me. But anyway, so that box has traveled with me. Every move that I've ever made. And I've moved to a lot of places, but I still have things within that box that I've had since childhood. And that box travel.
Ooh, your internet is brutal today, man. Anyways, so
with
while
me.
we're,
But
yeah, your internet is so bad today.
It is really bad today. So as soon as I put value on an attachment, let's say I put that value on this attachment of this, it would be hard for me to throw this plastic bottle away. And you could become a hoarder that way because I put an emotional attachment to an item that now I don't like to throw things away that I own because I'm so used to no longer ever seeing it. Because if it didn't fit in that box, I'd lose it forever. Well, you know what? I don't want to lose that toy forever. I don't want to lose that thing forever. I want to now keep it. So it's hard for me to get rid of things.
Yeah, I mean, I of course.
So I gave you two examples of attachment,
Sure.
one with people and one with items.
Well, I 100% relate. Obviously, I mean, you and I've spoken at length about these things in the past,
Mhm.
but I too, right? Like from an early point in my life, a lot of the close relationships that I was supposed to maintain were taken away from me. My father wasn't what he needed to be, and we left him. My brother and my sister both kind of grew up and left and didn't call back or whatever. A lot of my other family members, a lot of loss, right? It wasn't necessarily death, but it was loss. It was relationships that as a child you think are going to always be there, and then they weren't. And so between that and some of the other pain and stuff, yeah, I the way I coped as a kid was, okay, I can compartmentalize, and you're not there anymore, and I don't care. It was a survival mechanism. And so,
Right.
but the problem with that though is that was what made it easy for me to like womanize, for instance. That's what made it easy for me to be this amazing person to a woman, but have zero attachment and be able to walk away from her and go to somebody else with no problem. It was very easy for me to detach. So, but as an adult, the way that looks is it was, and it's getting easier for me, but it was very hard for me to show empathy. Sympathy I could do, right? We all can do. Oh, I'm so sorry. That sucks for you. But true empathy, I was so disconnected from my own feelings. It was very difficult for me to have any real empathy for anybody else. And without real empathy, you don't get connection.
Right.
And so a genuine, real connection with another human being, I freaking sucked at because it never occurred to me that I wasn't able to empathize with these people because I was compartmentalizing. Why? Because it was still the little kid inside of me that was, the way it was best described to me from a buddy of mine years ago. There's a little kid inside of me that like had to fight, and whatever that word conjures for you is what I'm talking about. I had to fight. And the way I pictured it was like a little kid in a boxing ring, just going crazy, fighting anything that gets in front of him. And then me as an adult, like I'm done fighting, but that little kid inside of me doesn't know that. He's still going crazy. And I needed to tap that little kid and be like, hey, it's okay. I got it from here. Like, you're done. You don't have to fight anymore.
Yeah.
And so like I had to have that moment where I told that little kid inside of me, like, bro, I'm good. I'll take it from here. I'll work on it.
Right.
And the day I did that, it sounds cheesy, but it was like a weird release for me to basically tell the little kid inside of me, like, I got you. You know what I mean? I'm
Right.
sorry you had to go through all that, but I got you. And so that was the moment, my that little kid inside of me could take the gloves off and just go to wherever he needed to be. And so for me, that opened the door of learning how to empathize, learning how to build a stronger connections with people. And yeah, same as you, I look back, I can't regret, I got to forgive myself for not knowing what I didn't know. But looking back, I would never do some of the things I was doing back in the day because I have more of a capacity for empathy now than I ever did. And so
Right.
I wouldn't be capable of those things. I wouldn't agree with it. I wouldn't like it. And that's an example of how that invisible pain, because had you had this conversation with me when I was, 18, 19, 20, I would have argued with you. There's no way no. I would have like, what? You're crazy. I don't get, but no, those pains were very real and very
Right.
much there. I, I was so used to fighting those demons and so used to overcoming it that I was blinded to it. They managed to kind of sneak behind the blinders where I couldn't see that they were there, even though they were motivating pretty much everything that I was doing. And that's what we're talking about with invisible pains. We all have that, right? It might look different for you. It might not be the same pain, but there's something. We all have mannerisms. We all have things, and not necessarily bad. They could be great. They could be good.
Yeah.
But the
Yeah.
point is we didn't just like arrive suddenly to where we're at. Like there was a process to getting here. I see another comment that was put up. That was Michelle from Facebook again. She says, do you think as a whole, humanity is more disconnected with advancement in technology? I'll take that one and say 100% yes. Um, I think technologically speaking, we're more connected as a species than we've ever been ever. But I think humanity is much more disconnected than it's been in a while. There's not a lot of human to human interaction. Everything comes in little sound bites. There's not a lot of context. There's ways to responding where you're not actually there physically connected with another human. So yes, I think we are more disconnected now than we've been in a very, very long time, if ever.
And you know what? The connection is just going to be different.
Yeah,
Our definition of connection is going to evolve. I think that our idea of when you say connection, um, it's not going to mean the
nope.
same to the generations in the future as it does to you right now, as it does to me
Yeah,
right now. It's just not. Because they may be okay with it. I mean, we had these conversations early on, Trey, about
yeah.
uh, is it good or
Oh, your internet is horrible today, man.
bad, and it's like to yet to be determined. I mean, this internet is causing us issues. I apologize. I'm going to get this hardwired in this office, man. I can't do it with
Oof.
Wi-Fi, but but it's really interesting. Yeah, you're right. I see the question before it came up. Yeah, human touch, oxytocin. Michelle says,
Absolutely.
yeah. I think there's definitely that proof that we have that human touch gives you that, and so we're good. But what I'm saying is that the future human will find a workaround. They just will. They're going to have to,
Yeah. We'll evolve.
because yeah, we're going to evolve in a way, and evolution isn't always in the right direction or positive direction. By the way, I know that people think progress is always good and evolution is always good, but not necessarily. It just is.
Yep.
Progress is just what it is, and evolution is just what it is. It doesn't make it right. It doesn't mean that the people in the future are right and the people in the past are wrong. It doesn't mean that the advances made are right and the prior to advancements is wrong. It just is what it is. And so there's a lot of to be said whether it's moving in the direction that we prefer.
We're gonna have to write
The
a
good thing
petition.
about it is that we're all short term. None of us are van. What to
We're gonna
write?
have to write a petition to you're in what, Sanford, I think. We need to write a petition and tell them to
Oh,
get better internet. It
this
is, it
what
is
internet
lousy
sucks.
today.
It's no better in New Smyrna, man. So I'm here at the radio station in New Smyrna at our home office here in New Smyrna, WPSN99.com. Surf Monkey Media, got to give a shout out to us at Surf Monkey
There you
Media.
go.
But
We have a couple comments while you were talking.
she goes, and he's gone.
Yeah. It says so Gabriella is also watching on Facebook. She says we also don't have
Awesome.
empathy for others. the cancel culture shows as that with technology. Yeah, I would say cancel culture is completely indicative of empathy
Yeah.
or lack thereof.
Yeah.
We're judging people by the worst moments of their lives.
Right.
Like once there was an old thing where a teacher wrote down, the nines timetables on the board, wrote down, 1 times 9 is 9, 2 times 9 is 18, and they got one of them wrong, and they left it that way on purpose. And then when they did it, the whole class was snickering and laughing and raising their hand, and they says, what are you laughing at? I said, well, you get that one wrong. He says, I got 90% of them right, but the only thing you focused on was the wrong one.
That's
They were
right.
doing that to prove a point, obviously. um and yeah, I mean, I think as a society, when it comes to empathy, and we actually did a Dharma Time, believe it or not, on empathy versus sympathy a little while back,
Right.
um but yeah,
You,
I think that empathy is something we're severely lacking.
you know what I think the bigger problem in something like that is, to be honest with you, is the fact that you can always find someone to agree with your crap. Um,
Of
you're
course.
always going to find somebody with like issues, like you see, like back in the day when you didn't have internet and you had issues, so you were the oddball out. The positive of that was it forced you when you were, I hate to say in the wrong because we're on Dharma time, but when you weren't in the flow of the stream,
You're unskillful.
yeah, it forced you to jump in that flow and kind of like at least play the game, man. This is the game,
Yeah.
and if you're not playing the game right, it's just going to make your life harder. Whereas now, but the negative is that if you felt like an oddball, you had all these issues, these personal issues, oddball, and everybody like kept making you feel like an oddball. So sometimes you hurt yourself because of it, right? Either
Yeah.
emotionally or physically. So now we're so worried about that person hurting themselves, either mentally or physically, that we've completely changed it to say there is no such thing as oddball. And it's like, well, wait a minute, I disagree. because because sometimes we do need to conform. Conformity is not always a negative, man. Some things
Yeah.
people do need to conform. For instance, I really don't like that as a business owner, that if I hire you, are you telling me that you can look any way you like, dress it any way you like, and never wear a uniform or wear the uniform the way you like to do it in my place of business? Why is that okay? No, that's not real world in my real world. Maybe in your real world, and that's fine. You build a company and you have your company do that. But in my company, I choose not to. I choose to have some sort of dress code or rules that make sense to me. And that is okay too. If it's going to be okay for you to not have it and do whatever, then it should also be okay to have it. And I think that's where the cancel culture goes,
Yeah.
awry. It forgets that if you're going to ask for leeway one way, you also have to respect the complete opposite way that you don't agree with, because that's really what you're asking for. And that's what I love, like when we say what America really stands for, right? Why I hate that people attack it is because the people that fight for your rights and freedom fought for even for you to say that I don't want it, don't like it, don't care about it, don't love that flag, I don't give a shit about that flag, I don't give a shit about this.
Yeah.
You're allowed to do that because that's exactly what they fought for.
Yeah.
And you know what? Any true person that understands what this was built on is okay with that. We may not always like it. I mean, I don't like it. I mean, if they're doing the Pledge of Allegiance or they're doing the, God bless America or something, you don't stand and put your hand on your heart, or you have your lid still on, you still have your hat on. I'm bothered by it, but I'm not emotionally like torn.
Right.
I just think you're just being disrespectful for maybe the right reasons or maybe the wrong reasons, and you're just being jerky because you choose to. But it's still on you. It's on you, and I don't have to have an emotional attachment to your behavior like that. So,
Well,
but the point is that there still should be, you should still be allowed to feel a certain way about it on either side of direction, because this country was fought for you to be able to do that. And emotional stuff is exactly one of those things. It's just an example.
well, even with that, right, with the cancel culture, we were dancing around
Mm-hmm.
another pretty huge component when it comes to invisible pain, right? And
Mm-hmm.
you and I've spoken about it many times. So I'm surprised we are just now bringing it up. But there's the other half of the
Mm-hmm.
equation here, right? Like before, we were talking about our behaviors outwardly and what we're doing, but there's a whole other
Right.
side of this invisible pain thing too, and that is our buttons, right? We all have
Mm-hmm.
buttons, and we go through trauma and we go through
Right.
pain, and that button is massive and it's huge, and anybody
Mm-hmm.
and everybody can come touch that button, and then we get mad at them for touching our button, even though the button is the
It's like a
size of an
Flavor Flav
entire.
clock. You got to say that. It's a
Yeah.
Flavor Flav
The
clock.
It's the biggest button on the planet, so you're inevitably going to touch it because it's so big. Nobody can tiptoe around that. And so, our go-to, our immediate knee-jerk reaction is to get mad at that person for offending us or stepping on our button. Not realizing is, no, we need to do the work to make our button smaller, right? So this idea of expecting everybody to not hit it, no, like your past pain and your trauma means you're going to be sensitive to certain things. There's going to be certain things that mean way more to you than a normal rational person would. And so if it's an unreasonable thing, instead of asking all these people to adapt to your unreasonable expectations, you got to look inward and figure out, okay, why is it I'm so connected to this? Why am I so attached to this particular thing? Where's that come from? And I think that's part of the work we all have to do internally is making our buttons smaller so people don't hit them as much.
Yeah, that's on you, man. That's on you. I mean, don't put your stupid button in my face, man, because that's exactly what I did. I'd always put it in their face and then go, yeah, but you can't touch it.
Of course. And he's gone again. He's gonna come back mid-sentence.
Of course they're gonna touch it. Don't put it in their face. I'm gonna pause until it's back. Am I back?
Yeah, you're back now. But no, same thing.
Am I hitting your button?
When I was younger, yeah, right. No, when I was younger, my button was huge, man. Like anything would set me off, man. I was itching for a reason to be angry.
I wanted to. I dare you to touch it.
Yes.
I would have it in your face to go touch my button. I bet you won't touch my button. Touch my button. See what happens. Touch my button.
What I imagine is like, being on the other side of like a lake or something.
To see what happens.
I imagine myself being on the other side of a lake and having them, saying, "Come on over here," but the lake is my button, so it's impossible to not hit it. Like that's how big it was, and that button was that size, and I was so aggressive with it because of all my past pains. Like I was dealing with issues and pains that I didn't know what to do with, so I took them out on everybody around me. That's an example of invisible pain. Had you asked me why I'm mad at this person, I wouldn't say because my father didn't love me. No. Why are you mad at this person? Well, because they did this and they should have known better. Blah, blah, blah. It had nothing to do with them. It was all my buttons.
Right. You know one thing that I have now.
Bad internet.
Yeah, I like. Yeah, no. You know, one of the things that's funny is that now it's like it's almost like you're a guy with tattoos, so I'm going to use your tattoos. It's almost like I tattooed a big buttons on me. So you think that I have buttons now. So there's, and I'm pretty sure I do, but just they're a lot smaller and hidden. And sometimes I don't even know where they're at. But I have like fake buttons now. They're like tattoos. So like people think they're hitting them, so they keep trying to press it. And
oh gosh, dude, your internet is horrible today.
It's like you do realize that. This darn internet, brother. All right. So, let me continue along that point. I know the internet, it disrupted it. But in other words, I've adapted to the point where I became who I became from a mixture of all my stuff, right? And so, and that's how we all are, by the way. You don't think people can see your past trauma, but I can read people's trauma, unfortunately, because that's my training. It's not just I have this natural gift, but I train it and then counsel people for so long that there's really certain amount of things that make a person respond a certain way. I mean, it's amazing how few things really like branch off into these things. So like, it's almost like when you see somebody and they go, "Oh, that's a 53 Ford." And I'm looking at the car, like, how did you know that? Like they know the engine. It's the same kind of deal. Like when you work with a lot of cars, you just tend to know the sound of it. Or if you hear gunfire and you fire a lot of guns,
dude, your internet is atrocious today.
You tend to know what kind of gun again. Here we go again. So, but there's people that see your trauma, see your pain. So now I've manifested into this guy, right? So I know that people that work with. What's going on with this internet?
Oh, it's so bad today.
They can see my issues. I know they know the issues that I had in my life, and some may even accidentally respond as if they still have those issues because I've now adapted those characteristics to the point where I just exist like this, right? So I could see certain people hitting those buttons because naturally they hit the button, because they don't know that they're predators or they don't know they're abusers or they don't know that they're bullies. So they're going to still try to hit that button naturally because that's their stuff, right? Thinking whether it's instinctually or whether they're, doing it on purpose, thinking that I'm going to respond, and I'm just not gonna. So that's what I think is funny about humans as we get older as well, or as we evolve. Some humans are now on a different side of it, but they're just projecting those behaviors, or projecting that lifestyle, because that's just now who they became. How earlier, Trinity, you were saying, that's not who you are, that's who you chose to be, or who you became because of what you went through. Yeah. And then even when you heal, sometimes not all that goes away.
Sure. And even when you're healed, you still choose sometimes to do the other. Like I have many of these like that.
Yeah, in other words, there's rivers that used to be, they're no longer rivers anymore, but you know what? You still see that gully. So like if water does come down, it's still going to go along that path where that old riverbed exists. Well, we're like that too. So even though we've processed through these issues, it doesn't mean that with the right amount of certain stimuli, we can't just fall right back into that piss poor behavior and piss poor activity. I know they're messing with me about the stupid internet. I know.
Michelle from Facebook says, "Are you on dial-up?" Oh, that was all right, Michelle. Bravo. That is the comment of the day right there, Michelle. Is he on dial-up? That's awesome.
Stupid internet.
Well, before we completely lose your internet, let's start doing our wrap-ups.
Don't make fun of my AOL.
Yeah. Like, oh man, it was brutal. Yeah,
it was brutal today.
You go get on your rotary phone and call somebody.
No, here's a sad thing. I broadcast from Telemed Clinics and Surf Monkey Meat out here, which the entire business model, every business.
That's so appropriate. You're in the middle of talking about it and it cuts out.
This out of this office is an internet. Every business here requires Wi-Fi, and it sucks today. It makes no sense.
It's awesome. All right. Well, I'm
going to go right upstairs. And I'm going to hammer David to get me a damn hard line in here by freaking next week.
Well, we got another show coming up on Friday, so hopefully it's fixed.
It hit my button. That hit my button, man.
Yeah,
technical issues hits my button.
Yes, it does. I can attest to that as his on-air husband for however many years. So I'm going to do the wrap up for both of us. Then that way we don't have to deal with the internet cutting out. So, real quick wrap up. First and foremost, some house cleaning. Thank you guys so much for participating today. A lot of you guys
Thank you all very much.
a lot of you guys are watching on Facebook Live. Appreciate that. For future shows, if you want to watch us live, you go to facebook.com/WPSN99 and you can catch all the updates. You could also follow us on TikTok or YouTube or Twitch. And if you want to follow us on social media, he is at the Dope Doctor. I am at the Dharma Guy. We together are at Dope and Dharma. But anyways, so yeah, just to wrap it up, at the end of the day, man, we all have pain. We all have trauma issues, things that we've experienced as a child or growing up, or even in our current years, that then cause us to respond and react to certain things in a certain way. For instance, let's say you have a bad relationship with somebody and it goes sour, then the next relationship you get into, you call that baggage. What it really is learned behavior, right? You're learning to anticipate or expect certain things. Maybe you read too far into it, and that's more along the lines of your expectations and your trauma and your pain that you experience, rather than that person's behavior. So the bottom line is really what I think what we're getting at today is you got to do the work. At the end of the day, you got to do the work. If you want different things out of your life, if you want different results, you can't just keep moving forward expecting the world to adapt to all of your things. It's your job to look inward. It's your job to try to figure out why you're doing what you're doing. And when I say it's your job, I don't mean it's only on your shoulders, right? Part of being your job is reaching out to the people around you, getting therapy, reading books, finding spirituality, whatever that is that's going to help you do it. You got to do it. You got to put forth that effort to try to intrinsically kind of get there for yourself. So, yes. So for those of you who aren't watching this live, Louis over here decided to tell Spectrum that they suck. We apologize for anybody who's listening to this as a podcast on whatever podcast platform you're getting it. I assure you our internet is not normally this bad, but it is what it is. Today's one of those days. But thank you anyways for listening. We appreciate it. And I think that's all we got. So do you want to try to put anything out there before your internet completely kicks off?
Adios, amigos.
There you go. So anyways, that's all I got, and appreciate you. So now that you know better, do better. Peace.